And with Total War being way more successful, we probably won't see a new Dawn of War for a long time.
Whilst even one of us lives, we fight. For only in death does duty end.
Man, ain't that hilarious? I said it probably wasn't going to happen, and a few months later, Relic Entertainment revealed Dawn of War 4. For the love of all that is Zinch, please do not make this a monkey's paw thing. Please be good. Please be good. Please, for the love of Gorka Morka, be good!
I don't feel safe.
Okay, so Dawn of War is focused on the Blood Ravens chapter of the Space Marines, for the most part. A chapter of Marines that has become a meme among online and game fans for being either thieving magpies, hair gel enthusiasts, or in the case of the guy from Dawn of War 4's trailer, Wolverine.
Yeah, right. The first scratch is always the most painful.
I am not. I am, however, disappointed.
This has led to a lot of people getting confused about these guys, and a lot of misinformation about them being thrown around. In this case, it's nothing harmful or dumb, just newcomers hearing the jokes, but never getting the reason why those jokes exist or the context. Now, of course, the Blood Ravens are a weird part of 40k's story. For a long time, Games Workshop never really considered the games canon, because if the games failed, they could just write it off as if they never happened, like a certain trilogy of books that shall not be mentioned by name. However, due to Dawn of War's success and fans loving the Blood Ravens, they've gotten a lot of love over the years. Hell, in 8th edition, their main character, Gabriel Angelos, got a model. Oh my god! So that's what a flesh cylinder looks like. Ugly Forge World heads aside, the Blood Ravens were designed by Relic Entertainment to be the main chapter of Dawn of War. They didn't want to feel constrained by chapters that were already established, but they wanted their own version of Ultramarines. A blank slate that can be an all-rounder faction in the game, but also something they could build and explore on their own, which Games Workshop was more than fine with, leading to the Blood Ravens having a fairly interesting story, organization, and personality. If you ignore the books. Yeah, to be frank, the Dawn of War books are either just average, or pretty bad. These books came out when there were hardly any 40k books around, so there wasn't a consistent way to interpret Space Marines. Hence why you got back-flipping Terminators. As well, the books go slightly off the beat from the games due to the authors either getting first drafts of the game's script or getting a rough outline and being told to flesh it out. In short, we are not including the books in this, because it only complicates the Blood Raven story, and the books aren't considered canon anyways. Now, let's talk about the Blood Ravens, and see how this chapter has grown from an unknown nobody to being beloved fan favorites. The Blood Ravens as a Space Marine chapter are a mystery, with records only going back to M37, but evidence shows that they might have existed even longer than that. But those records are hidden under inquisitorial lock and key, so damn you, Imperial censors! You win again! So, let's stick to the official records, shall we? In M37, the first recorded conflict of the Blood Ravens was a chaos uprising in the Gothic sector, and to say shit hit the fan would be an understatement. The Chaos cults were led by Chaos Space Marines, and different groups would constantly ambush, isolate, and destroy Imperial forces, leading to the Blood Ravens losing most of its senior leadership, including its chapter master, to many of these ambushes. With very little direction and in desperate need of leadership, the remaining Blood Ravens officers and battle brothers turned to their chief librarian, Azariah Vidia. Get it? Vidia? Like video games?!
Write that down, write that down!
Azariah accepted a leadership role, and instead of engaging the enemy again, Azariah studied the previous engagements, and using his psychic powers, he began to run calculations and predictions on new strategies, which would turn out to be the best idea, because when the Blood Ravens attacked the forces of Chaos again, it was a completely different ballgame. To Imperial forces, It looks strange. The Blood Ravens would attack seemingly empty areas or unimportant positions, then just leave. Unbeknownst to the Imperial defenders, the Blood Ravens were putting pressure on the forces of chaos and exploiting holes in the enemy ranks to sow dissension and paranoia by taking out enemy leadership or hitting strategic locations that the forces of chaos tried to keep hidden. This would culminate in the Blood Ravens slowly bleeding the forces of chaos until they could be dragged out into open battle and be completely wiped out. Although it was unorthodox, and rumors persisted of unholy assistance, the proof was in the cultists' corpses. The Blood Ravens had brought the Imperium a sorely needed victory in the Gothic sector. From there, Azariah would be promoted to Chapter Master, and although he was already their chief librarian, it was decided internally that from now on, the Chapter Master of the Blood Ravens could also be the chief librarian. Though, don't take that to mean that every Chapter Master after Vidya would be a librarian. It just means that both roles can be occupied by the same person. But Vidya was basically the guy who the chapter would base its core principles on when it came to tactics. Knowledge is power, and you should guard it well. Strangely, nothing of note really happens for the Blood Ravens again until M40, where their recruitment world, Aurelia, was invaded by the Chaos forces of Nurgle, led by the Great Unclean One, Ulcair. The planet of Aurelia was pushed out of its solar orbit, and during the Chaos Siege, the planet became an ice ball. The few remaining Blood Ravens who weren't on campaign out of the system were trapped on Aurelia. Their chapter master at the time, Mariah, tried to trap Ulcair inside the chapter's keep with a ritual, but the ritual had to be finished by his student, Azariah Kyrus. Sadly, Aurelia disappeared into the warp, and the Blood Ravens had to begin rebuilding again. After that, the Blood Ravens continued to rebuild and participate in campaigns and crusades for the Imperium. Although they lost Aurelia, they still had worlds like Cyrene, Calderis, Typhon, and Meridian in their home sector to recruit from. But during the early years of M41, a Space Hulk called the Judgment of Carrion appeared in the system. Though the Space Hulk wasn't new to the Blood Ravens, the expedition they sent aboard found and recovered Azariah Kyrus, who somehow survived the events of Aurelia. Kyrus was saved and brought back to the chapter, and quickly and mysteriously rose up the ranks, eventually becoming chapter master and chief librarian, which was something that didn't sit well with the young third company captain, Gabriel Angelos. Shortly after Kyrus was returned, the Blood Ravens began seeing non-stop campaigns and tragedies. First, their recruiting world Cyrene was subjected to exterminatus under Angelos' orders, as he had found that the planet was about to fall into a chaos uprising, leading to the chapter heavily relying on Calderis, Typhon, and Meridian for new recruits. Second, the Tartarus campaign began shortly after the destruction of Cyrene, where Angelos led the Blood Ravens to try and stop an orc invasion, only to discover that there was a chaos plot trying to free an ancient demon from its prison on the world. Gabriel would accidentally free the demon from an artifact called the Maledictum, and Tartarus was consumed by a warp storm shortly after the Blood Ravens fled the planet. From there, the Blood Ravens engaged in the 12th Black Crusade, but Captain Davian Thule was forced to pull out of the conflict by Azariah Kyrus, who ordered him and the Blood Ravens' 4th Company to withdraw when the Black Legion got involved. Then the Blood Ravens deployed to the planet of Cronus, once again led by Davian Thule, who was under orders to purge the world of all life and secure chapter relics that were on the planet. Sadly, this led to conflict with the Imperial Guard, who were under the command of Governor Militant Lucas Alexander, who refused to stand down because they were under orders from Imperial High Command to secure the world for the Imperium. The Blood Ravens were the victors of Cronus, however, wiping out the Eldar, Orcs, Necrons, Tau, Word-Bearers, and the Imperial Guard. This led to an inquisitorial investigation, but the Inquisition would find the Blood Ravens not guilty. The investigation concluded that it was a conflict of command structures, and that both sides were just following orders. This didn't help the Blood Ravens' damaged reputation, though, And to make matters even worse, rumors started spreading that Davian Thule had destroyed the relics and documents found on Cronus, so he retreated from chapter politics. Only Gabriel Angelos knows what Davian's true actions were that day. Shortly after, the Blood Ravens were deployed to the Karava system, under the new command of Indrik Boreal, an untested and newly promoted captain of the 5th Company. The Karava campaign ended in disaster for the Blood Ravens, as 5 whole companies were deployed to the system, only to see most of their forces wiped out by orcs, including the deaths of several veteran officers, librarians, and Boreal himself. One of the few survivors was Scout Sergeant Cyrus, who would swear never to speak of the campaign again. With this devastating loss, the Blood Ravens retreated back to Subsector Aurelia and slowly tried to rebuild their ranks. But uh-oh, what's that? We gotta kick a bleeding bird while it's down? Okay! The Blood Ravens' home sector came under attack by not only an Orc invasion and an Eldar invasion, but also the forces of High Fleet Leviathan. Though the Blood Ravens successfully defended their home system, a year later, the forces of Chaos screamed "Round goddamn 3" at them and invaded the sector, with the forces of the Black Legion at their head, and they returned the planet of Aurelia to real space. This would finally break the chapter, as it was discovered by Angelos and the Strike Force defending Subsector Aurelia that the Blood Ravens chapter master Kyrus had fallen to Chaos during his time stuck in the warp on Aurelia. Over the centuries, he had corrupted major portions of the chapter to join him, using the horrors of the Cronus and Karava campaigns to sow disillusionment and despair in the chapter, and make them easier to corrupt. This led to a full chapter civil war, with Gabriel Angelos leading the Loyalist faction and Kyrus leading the Traitor faction. This culminated in several things happening at once, but to make a long, painful story short, with the help of first Captain Apollo Diomedes, Gabriel and his side won out in the end. They stopped the forces of Chaos and routed out the last of the traitors within the Aurelian sector and within their chapter, though they did lose the world of Typhon to Exterminatus, which left the chapter with only Calderis and Meridian left to recruit from. But if you think that's the end of it for the Blood Ravens, man, you haven't learned anything, huh?
Oh no, it all went wrong!
Well, after the events of Dawn of War 3, you can watch my review for that story, Gabriel declared a time of rebuilding for the chapter, ordering the chapter to double its recruitment rate from the previous years. But you want to know what was happening around that time? That's right, the 13th Black Crusade was just blowing up Cadia, leading to the Great Rift splitting the galaxy in half. The chapter was once again thrown into turmoil, trying to stop rebellions on their worlds, losing hundreds of recruits to freak warp storms, and some of their librarians going insane from the sheer madness of it all. It took years for the Imperium to re-establish contact with the Aurelian subsector, with first contact being made by the Torchbearer fleet led by the Custodes, Captain Pertinax, who managed to find and get in contact with the Blood Ravens 7th Company. The Custodes delivered not only reinforcements, but the technology and means for the Blood Ravens to produce Primaris Marines. The Blood Ravens quickly used this to their advantage, rebuilding their chapter quickly with the new technology and Grey Shield reinforcements, who were swiftly brought into the chapter. The Blood Ravens story will be continued in the events of Dawn of War 4, where now Captain Cyrus and his company return to the planet Cronus to stop the forces of the Orcs and Necrons. However, the Blood Ravens will find aid from the mysterious first founding chapter, the Dark Angels, along with their Primarch, Lion L. Johnson. Will the Blood Ravens succeed, or will they find more tragedy on Cronus? Well, we will have to wait and see. But for now, let's talk about the Blood Ravens as a chapter. The Blood Ravens are what we call a Codex-compliant chapter. What that means is that before Robuti Gilliman rewrote the Codex Astartes after his return, the Blood Ravens followed the standard rules of chapter organization and building. 10 companies of 100 Marines, each along with the standard officer corps and armory organization. The only place the Blood Ravens differed from the Codex was with their librarius. You see, the Blood Ravens have a weirdly high amount of psychers within their ranks. Some Marines who were implanted with Blood Raven's gene seed, who had no psychic powers at all, somehow manifested them. This is highly suspect, but this has led to the Blood Ravens having a higher than average count of librarians among its chapter. Because of this, they have an even stricter set of trials for said librarians, with failures of these trials being carted off to a place called the Tower, aboard the Blood Raven's capital ship, the Omnis Arcanum, to be experimented upon and studied as to how to prevent these failures in the future. This disproportionate amount of librarians has led to rumors of special librarian squads being seen operating behind enemy lines, though these are, of course, only rumored. No, but seriously, the Blood Ravens do use full squads of librarians, but they are only in the first company and are deployed on special missions to recover special chapter artifacts, which leads to how the chapter beliefs were formed and how they operate. You see, due to the lack of knowledge of their founding, the Blood Ravens have become a very inquisitive chapter. They try to find anything or anyone that can explain their origins, wanting to answer questions like, which Primarch do they hail from? When was the chapter founded? Why does Day Old Lasagna taste better than Day of Lasagna? You know? This has led to the chapter to prioritize knowledge over all other things, and to their original battle cry, knowledge is power, guard it well. Though, after their civil war, the war cry was changed to, none shall find us wanting. As well, with them having no knowledge of who their Primarch is, they chose to revere the Emperor as their founder, which, fair I guess, he and his scientists did make the Space Marines. With this focus on finding knowledge, the Blood Ravens have a good relationship with the Adeptus Mechanicus, usually teaming up with them to go hunting for lost technology or knowledge. Though this has led other Imperial groups to have a very wild set of views and opinions on them, with some saying the Blood Ravens are cowards for their slower, more methodical ways of conducting war, while others, who are still bitter or highly pious, accuse the chapter of outright heresy due to the events of Cronus and their civil war, while others, like the Ultramarines and Captain Titus, see them in a more favorable light due to their think-first approach to warfare. Currently, the chapter is organized into 10 companies, though that might have changed after the events of Dark Imperium. We will hopefully learn more when Dawn of War 4 comes out, but for now, I'll go off their currently stated organization. The Blood Ravens are currently led by Chapter Master Gabriel Angelos, the former 3rd Company captain who wields Godsplitter, a thunderhammer made of the remains of an Avatar of Cain that was gifted to him by an Inquisitor during the Tartarus campaign. The chapter's most famous companies are the 3rd, 4th, and 5th companies, though for the 5th company it's more infamous. They are called the Fated, and no one really knows why the 5th company is called this, even those within the chapter. But the Battle Brothers of the 5th company wear badges of shame and penitence for some dark thing that happened. Rumors say that their librarian may have fallen to chaos, while others suggest that the company got stuck in the warp, though it's made very clear that whatever happened, it happened before Kyrus' shenanigans. The 3rd and 4th companies are also famous, as the 3rd company was the one led by Gabriel Angelos, while the 4th company was led by Apollo Diomedes, and they helped to end the chapter's civil war. Both companies served during the events of Dark Crusade and Soulstorm, but it is currently unknown who leads the 3rd and 4th companies after the events of Dawn of War 2 and 3. The Blood Ravens' famous characters after Gabriel Angelos are as follows, starting with Jonah Orion. After the events of Tartarus and losing their librarian Isidore Achios, Jonah became the librarian of the 3rd Company, and one of Gabriel's most trusted allies and friends. He survived the chapter civil war and became chief librarian of the chapter. Apollo Diomedes was the 1st company captain of the Blood Ravens during Kyrus' tenure over the chapter. However, due to Kyrus' betrayal, Diomedes was ashamed of his service and relinquished his command of the 1st company after the chapter civil war, becoming a chaplain shortly thereafter to atone for his own biases and his failure to recognize Kyrus' heresy. Captain Davian Thule was the captain of the 4th Company, and was one of the most popular captains the chapter ever had. Thule retreated from chapter politics after the Cronus campaign, as he was disturbed by the history he had learned and preferred to help with recruitment of new Marines. He was the first Bloodraven to fall to the Tyranids during the First Aurelian Crusade, but was interned within a dreadnought in order to survive. It is unknown if Davian Thule is still alive after the chapter's civil war. Captain Cyrus is a veteran of not only the Death Watch, but of the Karava campaign. Though clearly traumatized by the events of Karava, Cyrus continued to train scouts for the chapter and sided with Gabriel Angelos during the Civil War. Though it was unknown what happened to him after the events of the Civil War for some years, it was revealed in Dawn of War 4 that he not only became a company captain, but that he also became a Primaris Marine. The heroes of Aurelia were the main protagonists of Dawn of War 2, led by the player as the Force Commander. This group defended the Aurelian subsector from Xenos and Chaos forces through the 3 Aurelian Crusades. The members of this group are Sergeant Tarkus, Avitus, Thaddeus, and Cyrus, Tech Marine Martellus, Librarian Jonah Orion, and Dreadnought Davian Thule. Though it is unknown what happened to the nameless Force Commander and Sergeant Thaddeus, it was revealed that Tarkus and Martellus sided with Gabriel during the Civil War, while Avitus betrayed the chapter to the Black Legion and was subsequently killed for his actions. Now, let's talk about the theories of the Bloodravens lineage before we wrap up. Over the years, the lineage of the Bloodravens has been the subject of many theories. If you want an in-depth exploration of these theories, I recommend watching 40K Theories video, The Genetic Heritage of the Bloodravens. However, these are some of the suspected explanations of the chapter's origins. First, it was believed that the chapter hailed from either the Blood Angels or Raven Guard, due to the name Bloodravens and their color scheme. Though the Bloodravens have not shown any signs of the Black Rage or Red Thirst yet, or any of the genetic mutations like the pale skin and pure black eyes of the Raven Guard. Next was the Dark Angels, due to the chapter's nature of secretive behavior. However, the Bloodravens do not organize their 1st and 2nd companies to be a Deathwing or Ravenwing formation, along with the Bloodravens having a lack of knowledge of the Dark Angels' inner circle and no knowledge of the Fallen, which would both be huge indicators of Dark Angels' heraldry. Then there is the theory they hail from one of the Traitor Legions, most notably either the Word Bearers or Thousand Sons. The Word Bearers theory comes from Dark Crusade, where the Chaos Lord Eliphas taunts Davian Thule with his apparent knowledge of the Bloodraven's parentage, though Eliphas is a known liar, and his words should be taken with many grains of salt. The most likely suspect is the Thousand Sons. This is due to the Bloodraven's emblem being the same as the Thousand Sons Corvidae cult, the high amount of Psykers within both the Bloodravens and the Thousand Sons, it being revealed that Magnus sent the Thousand Sons fleet away before the burning of Prospero, along with loyalist Thousand Sons during the Horus Heresy surviving, and having been rumored to be made a part of the Second Founding. It is assumed by many fans that the Bloodravens are successors of loyalist Thousand Sons, though this has never been confirmed officially by either Games Workshop or Relic Entertainment. The Bloodravens are one of the most popular Space Marine chapters in 40k, due to them being the primary protagonists of the Dawn of War games, and being many people's first exposure to Space Marines, though the memes of them being thieves are wrong. The joke comes from a gameplay mechanic and Relic being cheeky with the War Gear drop systems fluff in Dawn of War 2 that led to these memes. There isn't any evidence of the Bloodravens actually stealing relics and weapons from other chapters. Still, they are one of the more interesting Space Marine chapters out there. Lead designer Jay Wilson was interviewed by FilmDag Miniatures in 2025 and revealed the design history of the Bloodravens. As I said before, Relic wanted their own chapter to play with in the 40k sandbox, and as they built up the chapter's backstory, they wanted it to focus on librarians due to several of the leads loving the unit type in the tabletop game, but also to have a Space Marine chapter not bogged down by the Horus Heresy, as Horus Rising was being worked on around that time and set to be released 2 years after Dawn of War's release. This also let them play with the idea of the Blood Raven's ancestry, and making a mystery that fans could be invested in. And considering that people are always excited to see the Blood Raven's return, and the fact that Gabriel even got a model to begin with, shows that Relic had the right idea on how these guys were designed, even though it's clear to see how Dawn of War and the Blood Ravens have changed from 4th edition all the way to 10th edition. In the next video, we will be exploring the Blood Raven's first steps into Warhammer, as I am going back to my childhood. We will be doing a retrospective of Dawn of War 1, looking back at its story and gameplay, and seeing if it holds up to the modern day. Of course, keeping in mind that it was a game made during 40K's 4th edition, so we'll see how it holds up. In the meantime, please subscribe to the channel, and if you want to watch it early, join the Patreon. It lets you watch my exclusive model breakdown series, see new videos early, join my private Discord server, and allows you to vote for what we talk about in the upcoming videos. The new poll is already up for you to vote on. Your support helps keep a roof over my head and gives you more videos like this. But until then, I'll see you all next time.